security in the Trump administration. Let's bring in Joe Moreno, the former federal prosecutor. Lovely to see you, Joe. Look, the New York Post asked this morning, is that it? Are they right? Is the indictment as weak as Donald Trump's supporters would have us believe?
Well, Christian, it's interesting because in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of speculation, right? There's been leaks, there's been rumors, and we've been forced to speculate on what could be in the case. Well, now we have the indictment and it's 24 hours later. And yes, we're still speculating because the indictment is extremely vague. And it's hard to tell if the prosecutor's office is brilliant in doing that because they have a strong case or because it's out of weakness, because they are leaving themselves lots of flexibility because, in fact, the case is not on steady ground. So it'll be interesting in the coming months. But I am surprised. I am surprised that in a case so monumental, the prosecutor's office would come out with something that on its face is kind of laughably vague and just ripe for challenge.
But put yourselves, Joe, in the boots of Alvin Bragg, who is a New York prosecutor, because he is focusing on the intent to defraud definition, and it differs in New York State compared to other jurisdictions, as you will well know. It's much broader, and people say that it opens things up considerably for Alvin Bragg. He is looking at 3 payments to people who could have undermined Donald Trump's election chances. And this was not just one payment, it was several, and it was with the same man. It was with David Pecker, who owned the National Enquirer. And he says that is what points to the conspiracy.
Okay, but so hush payments, while they may be sleazy, are not illegal. Catch and kill is not illegal. Paying people to stay quiet about something, whether it's true or whether it's false, is not illegal. It might be sleazy. We might not like it from a sort of optics perspective, but you can do that. And so it takes a real stretch to say, well, the transaction was legal, but it was just booked and described in accounting records in a way that was not accurate. And so therefore that makes it illegal. It's a stretch. I'm not saying it's impossible, but again, I can just see 2 or 3 very, very open weaknesses here that if I was on the Trump defense team, I would be all over.
Justine Greening, the irony of all this is actually if he'd allowed this story to have been reported that he'd had an extramarital affair with Stormy Daniels, it probably wouldn't have harmed his chances. The Hollywood Access tape came out. It didn't harm his chances. And he knew this. He said, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't harm my chances. He just didn't believe his own rhetoric. The point is, it's still not harming his chances. He's just literally in the last minute put out some information on Truth Social that he's earned $10 million from what is going on. And there's no other Republican, in the primary races at least, who looks set to challenge him.
He does seem to really feed off this adversarial politics and has always succeeded by pitching himself against the establishment in the US and saying that he's the man that can stand up for a whole range of Americans that don't feel that that Congress is really representing them. So in that respect, this will be a ploy that probably works in the short term for Donald Trump, with the Republican nomination, as you say, coming up as his first electoral battle. How it will work in middle America remains to be seen, and how it will play out, whether there will be other legal cases brought against Donald Trump, is also something that we'll see over the coming months.
Of course, Donald Trump's supporters, Miles, believe that they can paint him as the victim here, and maybe the base will buy it. Let's have a listen to Mark Levine on Fox News last night.
You know what this is? This is tyranny. Now, Donald Trump is a historic figure. You think if he was Mitt Romney, they'd give a damn? No. No. You think if he, frankly, was a Bush, that they'd give a damn? No. We, the American people, need to stand behind this guy. There's not another Republican that I can think of who can fight back and fight back this way.
The politics of this, Miles, is more interesting, though. He's talking to the base. And let's face it, the base don't need convincing. Is there anybody in America right now that is undecided about Donald Trump? The bigger question for the GOP, surely, is what moves the 10% of swing voters?
Well, Christian, you've hit the nail on the head. And I do want to note one thing, though. Of course, Donald Trump's allies have painted this as an act of a wayward, left-leaning prosecutor. But let's be clear how the American system works. A grand jury of U.S. citizens made the recommendation to bring these charges. It wasn't some prosecutor conspiring in a closed room. That's how this system works. But I think the bigger picture question you get to politically is what's going to happen next. And these cases could take a big turn. And I say cases because Donald Trump is on the cusp of a year of legal warfare. It is going to be lawfare as potential indictments come forward in Georgia and from the Justice Department. And don't forget, there will be a slew of cases in states across the country to disqualify Donald Trump from the ballot in 2024 by groups that don't believe he's constitutionally eligible because he incited an insurrection. He's going to be mired in legal cases, and here's where it could take a political turn. Right now, other people in the Republican field are acting aghast about this prosecution, but some of those people want to run for president, and eventually they're going to turn these charges against Donald Trump. What I think will be very interesting is as Trump's opponents, once the cases start piling up, go make the case in the early voting states here in the lead up to 2024 and say, look, this guy's got so many prosecutions against him. We don't want to take the risk of making him the nominee and him actually not being able to take office if he's convicted. So his opponents, I think, will eventually start using this against him.
I'll let you go. Let me give you the final word. There's obviously a lot of focus now on the other cases and whether this opens the stable door to some other indictments in other jurisdictions. Which one are you looking at that you would have greatest concern about for Donald Trump?
Yeah, Christian, I'm not, if I were him, I would not be too concerned about ultimately New York and the state of Georgia. I think there are escape hatches in both those cases, and I think that they're ultimately not going to stand. I would be concerned about the special counsel right here where I'm sitting in Washington, and particularly the classified documents at Trump's home in Florida, as well as his role in the January 6th riots. I think those are the cases that actually have some teeth. Those are the cases that have real exposure for President Trump. And as we march likely to charges in one or both of those cases, I think ultimately that's where his exposure is going to be.
Sounds right. We might need your expertise a little further going forward, Joe. Thank you very much for being on the programme. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Chris.
I just want to bring you some of that breaking